If you have a scary story you'd like to hear on the channel, then go to mariesfield.com and send it my way. And of course, thank you. I recently got into reading about glitches in the Matrix, and I think that when I was a kid, I actually experienced a glitch myself. Back then, it was just weird, but as I was reading about things and listening to people tell these stories, it occurred to me that my, wow, that was weird, may have actually been something a lot more than that. Obviously, when I was a kid, I mentioned this to my parents, but they just chalked it up to me being a creative kid and having an overactive imagination and dismissed me. Anyways, when this happened, I was in the 6th grade, so it was a while back. I don't want to put my age out there and feel old, so I'll just say it was well over a decade ago and leave it there. At my elementary school, we had 2 classrooms for 6th graders. There was Mr. Andrews' class, which was my class, and then there was Mrs. Kelly's classroom. Each class had around 20 or so kids in it. Being in 6th grade and the end of our elementary school journey, they were putting us through some interesting subjects and teaching us a lot about the world, and one of these subjects was world culture. I actually remember the classes pretty well, and they were some of the most interesting classes that we got to do. So, to explain the basics of what these lessons were, in Mr. Andrews' class, we got to learn about Japan and Russia. But what was most fun was that when we finished the lesson about Japan, we got to switch classes with Mrs. Kelly's room, and she taught us about Australia and China. So we learned about Japan in our normal room, then moved to Kelly's class to learn about Australia, then back to our normal room to learn about Russia, and then back to Kelly's for the lessons about China. It was really fun, and it was super cool to take the week in another classroom. Being a kid, it was just fun to spend a week in another teacher's room. And during the Australian lesson was when my glitch actually happened. During the week of the Australia lesson, I repeated a day. I know that sounds really uninformative, but there was a day during that week where we learned about the wildlife of Australia. I loved the lesson, and obviously we learned about kangaroos, as stereotypical as it sounds. I love kangaroos. To me, they are one of the coolest animals out there. We talked about them, spiders, birds, and a ton of other things that live there. During the lesson, Mrs. Kelly would pause and ask random questions to see if we knew the answers, like little pop quiz type questions. I didn't know anything about Australia prior to the lesson, beyond that kangaroos live there, and I learned that from our zoo. So we got through the lesson, and I learned a lot during the day. But then the next day, when I got to school, when we got to Mrs. Kelly's room, she started teaching us about the animals again. It was the exact same lesson as the day prior, from literally the first part of the lesson about kangaroos to the insects and birds. It was really weird because I knew every single thing she was going to say, and I answered every single question that she had correctly. It got to the point where she actually asked me if I had learned about Australia in the past, and I couldn't answer. I wanted to say, yeah, you told us all about this yesterday, but for some reason, I couldn't. I literally could not tell her that this day was a repeat of the day prior. It was incredibly bizarre how this had repeated, and I couldn't tell her anything about it. I just kind of nodded and smiled and kept going with the lesson, basically telling her about what she was teaching us. When I got home, like I mentioned, I told my parents about it, but they just kind of laughed at me and told me that I was just imagining the whole thing. What was weird is, I'm not sure if I had physically relived the day, and we spent 6 days in class that week, or if it was just in my head that I relived it. But I definitely recall the entire lesson happening twice, and me knowing every single thing that she was saying. It was super weird to me, and I have no explanation for it. Hopefully, people will find this entertaining, if nothing else, because to me, it was weird as hell. If anyone else has ever had anything like this happen to them, I would love to hear it, and hopefully they send it to you, because this event was the strangest thing I have ever had happen. I have a really weird glitch that happened to myself and my husband. It's not a huge story or anything like that, but it's one of those weird things that really makes you pause and think about the possibility of our reality being a simulation. So, back in December, my husband and I were invited to a small get-together at a friend's house. This was something we used to do annually around the middle of December, but thanks to COVID, we had all decided to go ahead and just not do it until we were sure we were all safe. Unfortunately, I have a medical condition that requires me to take a specific medication that is actually an immunosuppressant. Thanks to that, I have to be super careful in public right now, and these last 2 years have been absolutely insane. I've managed, but it's not easy. Anyways, this year's get-together was supposed to be a big one, since we've had to cancel for a few years. By big, I don't mean a lot of people, I just mean it was super important for everyone, and we were all looking forward to it. We'd all started the planning in November and decided that we would drive out on the 17th of December and stay there until the 19th, then head home. On the night of the 15th, my husband and I were talking about the whole thing, and he was asking if I was certain that I was comfortable with still going to the party, since it was going to be a decent number of people, around 8 or 9, including us. I said it was fine, that I trusted my friends, and that I knew that we had all taken the proper actions to minimize the risks. Plus, it wasn't a huge gathering. Sure, 9 people was a good amount, but it wasn't something crazy. He said all right, and we then went to bed. That night, I had a really weird dream. Sure enough, it was about the party. In the dream, I remember that my husband and I were at the party and everyone else was there, but no one was talking to each other. Like, the food was prepared, everyone had plates, and everyone was sitting at a table, but there was no motion at all. Everyone there just sitting at the table, completely still. Then my friend Serena stood up at the end of the table and looked at me with a dead serious look and said, "Michelle, you shouldn't be here. This is a dangerous place for you." I remember those exact words being said. She said I wasn't supposed to be there and that it was dangerous, and I remember that it was Serena specifically saying it. Now, it may sound incredibly stupid, but something about this dream caused me a huge amount of distress, and I think my husband could tell that something was wrong the next morning. He asked me if I was okay, and I told him that I had a weird dream about the party, and that because of the dream, I was second guessing whether or not we should go. Again, I know that sounds dumb, but then he said something that completely blew me away. He looked me straight in the face and asked me, "Did Serena tell you that we shouldn't be there?" I swear, I could feel my face go pale, and I started to feel dizzy. I asked him how the hell he knew that, and he told me that he had a dream similar to that a couple nights ago, and that was why he was so pushy about asking me if I was okay with going. The dream he described was pretty much the same as mine. People were there was food, but there was nothing going on at the party at all. It was just still. Then Serena said that we shouldn't be there. It was the freakiest thing to have someone else tell me my dream almost exactly, and I had no idea what to say. After talking it through a bit more, he said that it was pretty clear that we were both still a bit nervous, so we should sit this one out and go next year just to be absolutely sure that we're safe. I agreed with him completely. No matter how dumb it felt to follow the advice from a dumb dream, part of me felt that the fact that we both had it was important. We inform our friends, and they're upset, but they understand. We didn't tell them about the dream, obviously, but we told them that we were going to have to sit this one out and came up with some BS reason about me not feeling well and not wanting to get everyone sick. Well, about a week after the whole party happened, I got a call from who else but Serena. I answer and say hey, and she responds sounding like absolute hell. She hardly had a voice. She was coughing and just sounded completely lethargic. She mentioned to me that she was glad I didn't come to the party because apparently her dad had given her COVID and she didn't know she had it until about a day or so after everyone had gotten together. She mentioned that the day of the party, she had been feeling a bit weird, but it didn't seem serious. And then 2 days later, she was feeling like she was dying. At the end of it all but one of them ended up being sick with it. They all got through it, of course, but the fact that this basically became a mini super spreader event tells me that had we gone, I would have caught it and it would not have been good. I don't know if this dream we had was some sort of weird premonition, but the fact that we both had the same dream and we both called out Serena as being the person in the dream telling me not to be there when she was the one that most likely spread it to the group, that honestly makes me think it was something supernatural. Regardless, ever since this, I've been a pretty firm believer that things out there aren't always what they seem, and that reality is a bit weird. So, I have one of those stories that is basically, I should be dead, but something in the Matrix decided that I shouldn't, so now I have no explanation for these events, kind of situations, and I'm going to go ahead and say now that this story does include language and information about me wanting to end my life. So consider this your warning. I don't know if I should call this some sort of quantum immortality or if it was some sort of reality or timeline shift, but it was something. And to be honest, it kind of haunts me. So this all happened back in 2015, back when I was pretty much at the deepest point of my depression. I won't bore you with all the details. I'll just give the cliff notes as to why I was falling apart. In 2015, I was 17 years old, and two events completely destroyed my life. My mother ended up dying from a very aggressive and seemingly sudden onset cancer, and I was, put nicely, sexually assaulted by my cousin at the celebration of life get-together, a situation that no one in my family wanted to believe nor address, and still hasn't. Obviously, these two things happened pretty much back to back. My mom died, and my cousin assaulted me within about a week or so of it happening. With these two things weighing me down very heavily, I was not exactly what one would call a happy person. I was not coping with these two things well at all, and I was hit by a sudden wave of decision that I was just going to end my life. I decided that I was going to take whatever medications I could get my hands on in the medicine cabinet and would also swipe a bottle or two from my dad's room and would drive my car off a ravine or something. It wasn't a very well thought out plan, but it was what I decided on. As a quick aside, I am not condoning these actions, nor am I saying anyone should ever do anything that I decided to do. Ever. I'm just stating as fact what I did do. So I got what I needed stuffed into my backpack, and I told my dad that I was going to go for a drive to clear my head. I drove my car to a nearby park and did what I needed to do, threw everything into the back seat, and took off back onto the road, just waiting for whatever was going to happen to actually happen. I remember feeling a horrible pain in my stomach. I remember feeling like I wanted to throw up, and I remember feeling like I was getting incredibly dizzy. I have to assume that all of these were just effects caused by taking meds and mixing them with alcohol, or maybe just the alcohol itself, but it was definitely hitting me. I remember looking around for a ravine or a cliff or something like that, and seeing a spot that I could vaguely remember as being steep. The last thing I remember in this line of events is me slamming on the gas pedal, feeling the car accelerate, closing my eyes, and feeling the car leave the ground. I very distinctively remember feeling the car leaving the ground. I knew what was coming, and I was just waiting for it all to happen. But it didn't. The car never hit the ground, never flipped, crashed, or anything of that sort. I opened my eyes again and was nothing shy of confused. I was pulled over and parked on the side of the road. The car was still running, but I was at a complete stop with all 4 tires on the ground. When I looked over at the passenger seat, everything was just sitting there, all still sealed and full, like I didn't follow through on any of my plans. I no longer felt sick or dizzy, just really confused and angry. I stared out at the road, at the woods to the side, and then stared at the cars as they passed, thinking, how the hell did I not die? How the hell did I end up here? I ended up shoving everything back into my backpack and headed home. I obviously never told my dad about this, or anyone really. It's both really sensitive and it makes me sound insane, but I wanted to at least put it out into the world that I somehow reset a point where I didn't end my own life. I know what I felt. I know what I did, and I remember pretty much the entire thing as it played out. That feeling of being on stable ground after feeling the car go into the air is the one thing that will never leave my mind, mostly because the feeling of a car getting air is distinct. It kind of churns your stomach. Again, I don't know if this was quantum immortality or timelines or whatever, but it was weird to me and has stuck with me. And for anyone that cares, I'm about as good as I'm going to be now. I went through therapy and no longer talk to anyone in my family, but I'm trying to make the most of what I have. I have what I consider a glitch of some sort from way back when I was very young. This was a long time ago, and I'm not going to get into the actual number of how old I was. I'll just say that this was a very different time than what we are in now. I was in elementary school, and to put it delicately, I was of a different skin color than most of the people that went to this school, and because of that, I was quite frequently picked on or bullied by some of the kids in the class. For the most part, I could handle it. My parents always gave me the be better than them speech and told me that I couldn't retaliate, but there were these 2 boys in particular that were absolutely nasty to me. I won't name them here because they don't deserve to have their names even listed in this story, but I'll call them T and M. T and M were the biggest boys in the class. Both of them were overweight big, not muscle big. Of course, this was elementary school, so it's not like anyone really had much of a build to them. They seemed to latch on to the fact that they could bully me and get away with it for the most part, so that's exactly what they did, and they did it frequently. I was usually pretty good about looking over my shoulder and avoiding them, but I can't even begin to tell you how often they would find me when I was trying to stay away from them. Anyways, this isn't really about them being bullies. This is about the one time that something strange that I can't explain happened to me, and it's actually what seemed to stop their bullying. In this particular instance, I had gone to the restroom as I normally would, and of course, while I was doing what I needed to do, both T and M walked in together. I'm just standing there in a pretty awful way because I knew this was not going to end well. I knew what they were likely going to do to me. T walked over to me and asked whatever bull he said, and M went to check the stalls to make sure there was no one there. Of course, there wasn't. It was just these two and myself, much to my misfortune. T starts to push me and taunt me. M starts laughing at the whole thing, and after getting shoved to the ground and kicked a few times, M makes a comment that they should shove my head in one of the toilets and see if I can breathe underwater. At this point, there wasn't much I could do to stop them. I was already pretty well beat up, and I was much smaller than they were, so no matter how much I struggled, they were going to do what they were going to do. M grabs me to pick me up, and T grabs my arms, and they start shoving me into one of the first stalls, when out of nowhere, a booming voice shouts from the back stall of the restroom, "Put him down." We all three look, and the door to the stall is shut, but I can see what look like church pants and shoes from under the stall wall. The two other boys pause for a moment to think about their actions, and the voice starts in again saying, "If you hurt that boy any more than you have or ever again, I will find the both of you and you will regret the day you were born." At this point, I think they were confused and freaked out. They had absolutely checked the stalls. I watched M shove all the doors open to make sure there was no one there to stop their attack, and I knew that I was alone in the restroom before they walked in. T ended up just shoving me to the ground, and the two boys nearly ran out of the restroom, like something about this actually scared them. After they left, the man in the stall told me that I would be okay, and that from that moment on, they would never touch me again. I started asking how he knew that, but when I blinked, he was gone. The stall door was unlocked and open, and there were no feet under the door. I literally blinked and he just disappeared. I have no idea what that was, if it was someone from the future or another timeline coming back to help me out of this situation, if it was a guardian angel or what, but it saved me that day. Much to my surprise, M and T never touched me again. They never even came near me. Whoever or whatever that was, it absolutely saved me, potentially saved my life, and it scared them enough to make them stop attacking me altogether. So I guess I should say thank you to the Matrix for sending that agent at that moment to protect me. The glitches I've experienced have always been minor or just basic inconveniences. I have a few situations where things have disappeared and reappeared in random places, and I've had a few things in my past where things have changed from what I remember to something completely opposite. But for the most part, I like to believe that these could just be false memories or weird coincidences. I've always loved listening to glitch stories, but I've never been one to really take them to be absolute truths. Not saying people are lying, just want to look for that logical explanation. That said, I don't have a logical explanation for what happened to me, and because of that, I'm going to look at these with more of an open mind. This happened about 2 weeks ago. My boyfriend and I decided that we wanted to go for a walk around our area, and there's a walking path that actually goes around a significant portion of our small town. It's hard to explain, but it's basically like they built a walking path to circle the entire town, but it breaks off into a number of the small streets and sidewalks, so it's super convenient. We decided that we would take the path to the south and see where it took us, because we knew that in that direction there was a small park and we assumed that it went that way. We started walking on the path, and about 15 minutes into the walk, there was what is basically a walking tunnel that goes under a main street next to a spill creek. It was a bit later in the evening, so yeah, it was creepy, but there were lights and we were already headed that way, so I wasn't going to say we shouldn't go through it. As we got into the tunnel, I noticed that it was super quiet inside of it, which I thought was kind of weird. With being a concrete tunnel, you would think that the sounds would be echoey and that the road noise above would be amplified, but it was seriously just silent and still. The tunnel itself was probably a couple 100 feet in length, so it's not like it was huge or anything. We walked in, and after a few moments, something just felt really off. Like my anxiety was hitting me in the face really hard, but there was nothing about it that I should have even been scared about. I went to tell my boyfriend that I wasn't feeling great about pressing on and that I thought we should go ahead and head home, and before I could say anything, something else cut me off. I say something and not someone for a reason. The voice that responded did not sound human. The inflection was super robotic and monotone, almost like a Siri or Alexa voice, but it sounded like it was trying to be human, but couldn't quite make it work. I remember exactly what it said too. It said in its creepy, straight tone, "You should go home, Hannah." Hannah is obviously my name, and it seriously made my skin crawl because what the hell was it? My boyfriend and I both have Androids, so it wasn't Siri, and neither of us have the Alexa app on our phone. I know that we have the Google Assistant, but it makes a dinging noise when you set it off, and the voice didn't really sound like it was coming from our phones. It sounded like it was coming from the tunnel. There were no places where someone could have hidden a speaker or something. Neither of us had our phones out or the sound on, and no one else was in the tunnel with us. It was just us walking. Aside from that, even if some random person was playing a prank, how would they have known to have it say that we should go home when I hadn't gotten the words out? And how would they have known my name? I asked my boyfriend if he heard what I heard, and he said that he did. And we both decided that we needed to go ahead and go home instead of going to the park. The next time we walked that way, I didn't get that same nervous feeling about the tunnel. It was perfectly fine. As we walked through, I looked around the tunnel for like a grate or a vent or somewhere where someone could have hidden something for a prank, and there weren't any places that would work. There weren't any speakers in the walls, and there wouldn't be any reason for them to be there anyway. This was just a walking tunnel. We were lucky there were a few lights in the ceiling as is. I have no idea what told me I needed to leave, and I have no idea why it told me to leave. But I'm glad I listened to it, I guess. Whatever it was, I want to believe that it saved me from something, and if I hadn't listened, something bad would have happened. So I guess I wanted to put this story out there as a way to show my gratitude to the Matrix. So the other day, my husband and I had to go grocery shopping. It's a small town that we live in, as in blink and you'll drive through it small. So of course, the store in the parking lot is just as small. Because it's important to this story, I'm also going to explain how the parking lot is set up. So there's only 2 rows of spots in an area on the side of the building to park. The side area is usually used by the employees, as you can usually see them leaning against the cars, talking and smoking. Then the 2 most front spots are handicap parking only, with 3 or 4 spots on each side of them. I can't remember exactly at this point. I parked in the spot furthest from the entrance, on the right, looking at the building. I remember this because it was over the weekend and it's usually pretty busy, so parking isn't always convenient, so I ended up waiting for a car to pull out so I could at least be in the row closest to the building. As I got out of my car and walked to the left to enter the store, I noticed a sticker on the back of the handicap parking sign. I specifically remember this because it was an avocado with a funny saying. It said something about "don't be down in the pits" or something to that effect, which I found was fitting with our current state of the world. So we entered the store, do our shopping as normal, nothing crazy about it other than the price of beef, and start to head to the exit. As we were walking out, I went to walk left to the car when my husband stopped me, saying we parked to the right. I didn't think much of it and told him, "No, we parked over here," to which he again disagreed. So to humor him, I said fine, started walking the other way as I grabbed my keys to set off the alarm to prove him wrong, when it started going off in his direction to the right. I stopped because I know for a fact we parked on the other side. I even went back to the handicapped spot to check the sticker and told my husband about the sticker as I walked up to it, as I remembered the saying. The sticker was still there though. I asked him how I would have known about the sticker if it was in the opposite direction. He just shrugged it off and said I probably remembered it from a previous trip, but I know that can't be. I specifically remember it because I thought it was clever and I hadn't heard it before. My husband was also with me the entire time, so I know he couldn't have moved the car closer just to mess with me or just to be nice and no one else was with us. The only thing I can think is that it had to be a glitch. Something broke. So that, my friends, was another collection of Glitch in the Matrix stories. And some of those were a little heavier this time around. Looks like 4 of them possibly saved lives. So kind of eerie, but also good job, Matrix, for helping people instead of taking items. That's good. And if you enjoyed this video, please do give it a like below. And if you'd like to hear more content like this, consider subscribing. And lastly, don't forget to leave your comments on your thoughts or let me know, have you experienced a glitch? And with that being said, friends, I hope you have a fantastic week. And until next time, take care.